They said he was still alive, though no one had seen him without gloves in years. The neighbors whispered about the man who never took off his mask, the one who only came out after midnight, when the wind sounded like breathing and the porch lights flickered in rhythm. Some claimed they'd caught a glimpse of him in the window, his skin pale and stretched like candle wax, smiling long after the smile should have ended. Others said he talked to his reflection, and sometimes it talked back. If you pass Birch Lane after dark, you might hear it. The faint rustle of fabric dragging along the pavement, the low hum of a voice rehearsing words it no longer believes. I didn't see him. It wasn't my fault. And maybe you'll notice that the air feels different there, heavier, like it remembers something you don't. But stories like his don't start with monsters. They start with men who pretend too well. So let's go back, before the masks, before the whispers, to the night when Thomas Reed still believed pretending could save him. I used to love Halloween, the smell of carved pumpkins and wet leaves, the laughter of kids in masks running down the street. It made the world feel simpler, almost forgiving. At school, I'd let my students paint ghosts and broken moons on construction paper, pretending the season was about imagination, not death. Maybe that's why I liked it. Because for one night, pretending was allowed. No one asked who you really were. Back then, I lived in a small house at the end of Birch Lane. The kind of place where the air turns cold too early, and the porch lights flicker like they're trying to remember how to glow. I'd come home late from grading papers, pour a drink, and sit by the window watching the neighborhood decorate itself into something unreal. Plastic gravestones, paper skeletons, orange lights strung like nervous smiles, the whole town rehearsing for something darker. People thought I was doing better. I smiled again, taught again, went to the grocery store without staring too long at the cereal aisle where that boy's mother once worked. I told myself time was enough. Time forgives everything if you let it. But some nights, I could still hear it. The sound of metal against asphalt, that sharp, bright silence that follows impact. You learn to build walls around that kind of memory, to live inside them. You learn to decorate them, call them home. When October came, I decided I'd join the Halloween parade for the first time in years. The theme was Monsters Through the Ages. It seemed harmless. I spent nights sketching my costume, something tall, skeletal, unsettling, but human enough. I wanted to make people laugh, maybe even admire the craft. That's all it was. Just art. Just another mask. I remember standing before the mirror that night, the costume spread out across the bed, black fabric, pale latex skin, teeth made of sculpted resin. The air smelled like paint and whiskey. I glued the pieces on slowly, layer by layer, until I couldn't recognize myself. When I finally looked up, I saw something that made me pause. Not fear, exactly, but a kind of curiosity, like the man in the mirror was waiting for me to say his name. I smiled to break the tension, but the face didn't move the same way. The latex crinkled at the edges, and for a second, I thought I saw the reflection breathe differently than I did. It was probably the light, the dim bulb above the sink flickering like it always did. Still, I turned away faster than I meant to. The clock read 8:03 p.m. The parade would start soon. I told myself I was fine. I told myself it was only a costume. Outside, the street was alive. Laughter, footsteps, candy wrappers fluttering across the pavement. I walked among them, my mask glinting in the streetlights, children pointing, parents chuckling nervously. For once I felt invisible in plain sight, safe behind the monster. It was strange, the peace that came with that. As if I'd been waiting all this time for a night when it was acceptable to stop pretending I was human. The first strange thing was how the mask felt when I got home. It should have itched, pulled, reminded me I was still underneath it. But it didn't. It clung to me like it knew my skin, like it belonged there. I tried to peel it off right after I closed the door, laughing a little at how committed I'd been to the act. But the edges wouldn't lift. The glue had dried, maybe fused with sweat. I told myself it was fine, that a hot shower would soften it. The water ran for half an hour. Steam filled the bathroom, curling around the mirror like fog, erasing me piece by piece. When I wiped it clean, the face looking back was still the same, still the monster. The paint had faded, but the eyes, they looked wrong, too wide, too steady. I leaned closer and whispered, "It's just makeup." But the mouth didn't move. Not right away. It caught up a moment later. It was thinking about whether to obey. I slept badly that night. Every sound felt amplified. The refrigerator hum, the groan of the old floorboards, the wind brushing the siding like fingertips. Sometime after 2, I woke up to the faintest scratching. It came from the hallway, slow and irregular. I sat up, listening. The sound stopped the moment I held my breath. I waited, counting the seconds. Then it started again, closer this time, softer, like nails dragging lightly across wood. I told myself it was the cat next door or branches against the wall. Anything but what it sounded like. Someone walking just outside my room. I stood, the costume still hanging on the chair by the door, its face turned toward the bed. In the dim light, it looked almost alive, the hollow eyes catching bits of the moon through the blinds. When the floor creaked again, I whispered, "Who's there?" Silence. Then, a breath. Not mine. I reached for the lamp, and the instant the light came on, the sound stopped. The house went perfectly still, as if holding itself together. I laughed, too loudly, because I had to. I told myself it was nerves, the lingering echo of the parade. But even after turning the lights off again, I couldn't shake the feeling that the costume wasn't where I'd left it, that maybe it had moved, just slightly. In the morning I found black smudges on the hallway wall, long uneven streaks, like something had dragged its hand along it during the night. The fingertips were wider than mine. The latex gloves lay on the floor, sticky with what looked like sweat, or something thicker. I held one up to the light. Inside, faintly pressed against the material, were lines that looked like veins. I didn't go to work that day. I told the school I was sick, which wasn't a lie. My reflection still wore the same tired grin from the night before, and no matter how many times I washed, my skin stayed pale beneath the eyes. I tried to shave, but the razor caught on something rough under my jaw, like dried glue or scar tissue. When I pressed harder, it bled, black at first, then red. That night, I placed the costume in the trash bin behind the house. I watched it sag there, half lit by the porch lamp. The teeth gleamed faintly, as if they were wet. I turned away, went inside, and locked the door. Around midnight, I heard the bin lid close on its own. By morning, the costume was gone, but the smell of latex still lingered in the air. Faint, sweet, almost like skin. The days that followed felt like someone else's life stitched around mine. I moved through them carefully, trying not to disturb the seams. The face in the mirror no longer looked like the man I remembered. There was a grayness under the eyes, a tautness around the mouth, as though the expression had forgotten how to soften. People at work noticed, of course. They asked if I was sleeping, if I'd caught the flu. I told them I was fine. It was easier than explaining that sometimes when I blinked, I saw my reflection blink a fraction too late. By Thursday, the whispers started. Not from people, from spaces. The empty classroom when the bell rang. The art room sink dripping in rhythm, syllables hiding in the sound. I'd catch a faint murmur, a tone that seemed to echo words I hadn't said aloud in years. I didn't mean to. The same phrase over and over, so quiet it could have been imagination. One afternoon, I stayed late to finish grading. The hallway lights shut off automatically at 6. The silence that followed had weight, as if the building were holding its breath. When I turned toward the door, I saw a faint outline on the glass window beside it, a face pressed close from the other side. The features were smeared, more suggestion than detail, but I knew them. It was the mask, the one I had thrown away. I froze. The outline tilted its head, mirroring mine. I took a step back, heart pounding. Then, with slow precision, the face began to move down the window, sliding out of sight without sound. I waited 5 minutes before daring to open the door. The hallway was empty, only the faint scent of latex and something burnt. I drove home trembling, my hands pale on the steering wheel. The wind carried leaves across the road in frantic circles. Every glimpse of shadow felt familiar, as if something followed just beyond the headlights. When I reached Birch Lane, the street was darker than usual. The porch light that always flickered was steady now, burning white. Through the window, I could see a shape inside my living room. It was standing near the couch, tall, unmoving, with a hollowed face of pale skin. My own coat hung from its shoulders. I didn't go in. I waited outside for an hour, watching the figure barely shift, its head occasionally turning toward the window like it was listening. Finally, I drove to the edge of town and slept in my car. I told myself I'd dreamed it, that exhaustion was making me see things. But when I returned the next morning, the front door was open, and muddy footprints led from the hallway to the mirror in the bathroom. They stopped there. The reflection that met me wasn't standing where I was. It was closer, leaning forward, smiling. I remember stepping back, whispering, "This isn't real." The image in the glass tilted its head again, just slightly, like the face in the school window. For the first time, I noticed something new. The eyes weren't mine. They were glassy, bright, and hollow. That night I tried burning what was left of the costume. I found scraps of fabric near the trash bins, blackened, damp, still warm as though someone had just touched them. The fire caught quickly, the smoke rising in thick, oily ribbons. It smelled like melted wax and decay. As the last of it burned, a soft sound came from inside the flames, a sigh, almost human, almost relieved. But when the fire died, I saw something glinting in the ashes, a fragment of the mask's jaw, half melted, still curled into a grin. I reached for it without thinking. The surface burned my fingertips, but when I pulled back, there was no mark, only the faint scent of latex again, sweet and familiar. That's when I understood. It didn't need the costume anymore. It was already wearing me. I stopped pretending to sleep after that. Nights turned into long hours of listening, to the hum of the refrigerator, to the shallow rhythm of my own breath, to whatever breathed back. There was a pattern to it now, a mimicry. Every exhale I made came answered by another, slightly delayed, as if the house were rehearsing how to be alive. By the second week, my reflection wasn't even trying to match me anymore. When I washed my hands, it watched. When I looked away, it smiled. I started covering the mirrors with old bed sheets, but I could still feel it moving underneath. A subtle ripple in the fabric whenever I passed. Sometimes, just as I was leaving a room, I'd hear the faint sound of something dragging across glass, like fingertips tracing a message I refused to read. The voice came soon after. It didn't sound foreign. It sounded like memory. My own voice from years ago. Younger, lighter, unbroken. It whispered the same words I'd said that night after the accident, when I knelt on the asphalt beside the broken bicycle. I didn't see him. It wasn't my fault. The first time I heard it, I almost believed it. The second time, I understood it wasn't trying to comfort me. It was reminding me of the lie. I'd told the police the boy swerved into the road too quickly, that the streetlight was out, that I couldn't have stopped in time, but there had been light. I remembered it later, a warm orange glow that caught in the windshield just before impact. I'd been drinking. Not much, but enough. I could have told the truth. Instead, I built my life around the lie and called it healing. Now the lie was standing in front of me. It happened one evening as I sat in the kitchen, the room dim except for the flicker of the stove's pilot flame. I heard footsteps in the hall, slow, deliberate, unhurried. When I looked up, he was there, the thing that used to be me. The same posture, same eyes, but emptied of hesitation. The latex mask had merged with skin, its edges disappearing into flesh. He didn't speak, not at first. He only watched, head tilted, studying how I breathed. Then, in a voice that sounded like mine filtered through static, he said, "You kept saying you were sorry, but you never meant it." I wanted to shout, to deny it, but the sound that left my throat was barely human. Dry, cracked, like something unused for years. He stepped closer. The air smelled like burnt plastic and autumn leaves. "You wore me," he whispered. "You wore the monster so no one could see the truth. Now you don't get to take it off." I stumbled back until my hand hit the counter. The knife block was there. I pulled one out, holding it between us. He smiled. "Go ahead," he said. "See who bleeds." I don't remember crossing the distance between us. Only the feeling of the blade meeting something that wasn't solid, like cutting through smoke and memory. The reflection shattered, not into glass, but into 1,000 fragments of sound. The crash, the scream, the silence that followed. When I looked down, the kitchen was empty. My hand was wet. The knife was clean. In the window above the sink, the night stared back at me. My face, or what was left of it, stared too. The skin looked smoother now, almost painted. My eyes, once brown, had gone black around the edges. I tried to speak, to call someone, but the voice that came out was steady, hollow, rehearsed. I didn't see him. It wasn't my fault. And for the first time, I heard laughter after the words, low, relieved, like something that had finally finished waiting. It's been 9 years since that Halloween, or maybe more. Time doesn't pass the same when you stop belonging to it. I moved once, maybe twice. The details blur, but the quiet follows. People say moving on means forgiving yourself, but forgiveness only works if there's someone left to receive it. I don't think that man exists anymore. I still teach, though not officially. The district let me go after parents complained about my appearance, the pale skin, the distant stare, the way children said I smelled like the inside of a mask. Now I paint signs for local shops, things that don't look back. I keep to myself mostly. No one notices the gloves I wear, or how the voice that answers the phone isn't quite synchronized with my lips. At night, I walk the same streets where it all began. The jack-o'-lanterns return each October, carved with faces that always seem to resemble mine. Sometimes I think the town remembers. Other times I think it's trying to forget me, like a body rejecting a transplant. Birch Lane is quieter now. The house I lived in is empty, its windows covered with dust and dead flies. The mirror I shattered still leans against the bathroom wall. I never had the courage to throw it away. When the wind moves through the rooms, it sounds like breathing. I tell myself the monster left long ago, that what remains is just the echo of guilt wearing human shape. But on certain nights I feel the skin tighten around my jaw, as if adjusting itself. The eyes dry out first, the pupils shrinking in the dark until everything looks painted, flat. The face that stares from the glass still tries to imitate expressions, grief, regret, kindness, but they're gestures now, learned habits. There's no emotion underneath, only memory performing itself. I remember the boy's name sometimes. I say it aloud, softly, to see if it still hurts. It does, but in a distant way, like pressing a bruise that belongs to someone else. The monster and I share that wound. It's what keeps us tethered. I think that's why it never killed me. It needed me alive to keep the story breathing. Once, a child knocked on my door by mistake. She wore a plastic mask of a vampire, bright red lips and sharp teeth. When I opened, she froze, not from fear but confusion, as if something about my face reminded her of the mask she was wearing. I handed her a piece of candy with gloved fingers. She thanked me, still staring, and said, "You don't need a costume." I watched her run back to the others, their laughter trailing off down the street. For a moment, I thought about following, about stepping into the crowd, letting the night swallow me the way it did before. But I didn't move. I just stood there, breathing the cold air through a face that no longer felt like mine. The next morning, the mirror in the hall was uncovered. I hadn't touched it. Dust had settled along the edges, but the glass itself was clean, as if wiped from the inside. I saw myself clearly for the first time in years, every detail sharp and still. I expected horror, but what I felt was understanding. This was the end of pretending. They say the soul reshapes itself around the truths we refuse to face. I suppose mine finally finished changing. I don't dream anymore. I don't flinch when I see my reflection. The voice in my head and the one that leaves my mouth speak in unison now. We tell the same story, word for word, as though rehearsed. Some nights I walk past the old school, its windows dark, the playground rusting quietly. The wind carries the faint echo of children's laughter, but I know it's only memory playing tricks. Still, I pause, listening. The sound fades, then returns, faint, rhythmic, like someone whispering from inside my chest. It asks the same question every time. Do you remember what you were before? I never answer. There's no use lying anymore. I didn't become the monster. I just stopped pretending not to be one.